Hello, my name is Sonia Chaudhry, and I'm a junior at Westford Academy and the president of the Westford Academy Museum Club. And today we're here at the Westford Museum, and I'll be talking to Westford Academy Modern American History teacher Christopher Gorham about his new book, The Confidante, the untold story of the woman who helped win World War II and shape modern America. He will be presenting his book at the Westford Museum on Sunday, March 12th at 1:30 p.m.
Sonia, glad to be here. Glad to be here at the museum. Thank you.
So Mr. Gorham's book is a look into the life of Anna Rosenberg. According to Life magazine, Anna Rosenberg was far and away the most important woman in the American government and perhaps the most influential female in the world. From modest immigrant beginnings, Anna Rosenberg rose to the highest levels of American power and stayed there, shaping national policies in areas dominated by men, in business, the military, and politics. She was, at the central points of history, a trusted advisor to Presidents Roosevelt and Truman during World War II. Her personal plan for the arsenal of democracy became the nationwide model. She preserved the secrecy of the atomic bomb, and following her mission to wartime Europe, she guided the direction of the GI Bill. For her contributions to victory, Anna Rosenberg became the first recipient of the Medal of Freedom. As the Cold War heated up, she was appointed Assistant Secretary of Defense, where she rebuilt the military and reshaped its policies. So now let's start our Q&A with Mr. Gorham here. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, Mr. Gorham?
Sure. When I was a boy, I spent a lot of time with my... Thank you. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. They lived nearby, and my grandfather had been an officer in World War II. And he had a little cigar box of patches and black and white photos and newspaper clippings about the war. And I was just fascinated. So when I went over to his house, sometimes he'd bring that out and I would take a look. And you know, from there it was into his library where I started reading the history books. And you know, so history has just been such a big part of my life from the time I was very, very young. And it's just very gratifying to get to this next level and actually have a book come out.
Now, is this book, The Confidante, your first book?
It is, and it came about I didn't really plan it. It came about really through an accident, a fortunate accident. I had seen a picture of Anna Rosenberg with President Truman, and it said Assistant Secretary of Defense at the bottom of the photo. And I thought, who is this person? I've never heard of her. You know, we've heard of Eleanor Roosevelt, we've heard of Frances Perkins, but not Anna Rosenberg. And I asked some students to do a little research on her, and lo and behold, there was no book, not a single one on this remarkable woman. So that was sort of the genesis of my interest in the book, and or my interest in Anna Rosenberg. And so it was just sort of a happy accident.
Now, while you were researching, what were some of the more surprising aspects of Miss Rosenberg's life that you discovered?
That's a great question. And you might be too young to know of Zelig, but you might know Forrest Gump. There are characters that seem to have play a role in so many bits of history, like those two had. And that was Anna Rosenberg. You know, she's got a hand in the GI Bill, in Executive Order 8802, in she's in Europe just weeks after D-Day. She knows presidents from Roosevelt all the way to Johnson. So it was just this, as we looked, into the books, or her papers rather, the boxes of papers, it was just, she was in one really amazing bit of history after another, after another, after another. And that was just, it was surprising and wonderful. And, it just kept reinforcing that this story needs to get out and be told.
I know this is probably the main focus of your book, but how did Anna Rosenberg specifically help bring about U.S. victory in World War II?
Sonia, that's another great question. Really in three ways. The first was by helping mandate that Black Americans were invited to the defense jobs that were well-paying and that were starting to be doled out in the months before Pearl Harbor. And it was a shame that they weren't being given those jobs at the beginning of 1941. But Anna Rosenberg helped President Roosevelt draft and then sign Executive Order 8802, which was really the first federal action on civil rights since Reconstruction. The second way, like you mentioned in your introductory comments, was her labor plan, her personnel plan to make sure that all the factories and all the shipyards were staffed, all the airplane factories were staffed without work stoppages, without labor piracy. It was called the Rosenberg Plan. Other folks called it the Buffalo Plan, but it was rolled out nationwide, and it's the reason that the arsenal of democracy was allowed to fire at full blast throughout World War II. And lastly, like you also mentioned in your introductory comments, the secrecy of the atomic bomb program, the Manhattan Project, was imperiled when some of the lab folks wanted to unionize, which was their legal right to do. But President Roosevelt asked Anna Rosenberg, his Mrs. Fix-It, to go to those labs, talk to those labor leaders, and please don't make a public thing out of this because national security was vital at that time. And they agreed with her. She was able to get them to stand down at that time just because the president had such a good track record with the union folks. So those are three really tangible ways that Anna Rosenberg helped the United States achieve victory in World War II.
She sounds like a very impressive woman.
No, you're right about that.
How did your background in law and history help you tell her story to all of us?
In law, you have to research, as you're probably learning in mock trial, but research is such a key part of that, and it's time-consuming, it can be laborious, but the end result really is the product of the research that you do. So my legal background really helped with my ability to wade through boxes and boxes of information and sort of, take the good nuggets, the great stuff out of it. As a teacher, a history teacher, I'll tell you, the greatest thing I've learned in my over 10 years of teaching at Westford is how to tell stories. And it's been a function of, it's 7:35 in the morning and there's a bunch of 17-year-olds in front of me. So how do I keep them awake and keep them engaged? So my storytelling has gotten a lot better over the years. And if I didn't have the storytelling chops, there's no book, The Confidant.
Turning back to Mrs. Rosenberg, where do you think she made the most impact in her very long career?
That's a terrific question, and I have wrestled with that a bit because she did so much in so many areas. But I think it's that combination of civil rights and making sure the arsenal of democracy was able to fire at full bore. And those are just such critical things. If contracts weren't fulfilled at the aircraft factory or the tank factory, lives could have been lost overseas. So keeping that process working smoothly was just so incredibly important. And of course, her civil rights bona fides, went back before World War II and continued well after World War II. But her action in getting black Americans to be hired by the defense industries in 1941 was a remarkable achievement for her and for the president.
Now, I want to ask you, what was it about Ms. Rosenberg that helped her to succeed for so long in these male-dominated fields?
I had the same question as I was researching and writing, and I think I got the answer. I know I got the answer when I talked to her grandson. Her grandson, Thomas Rosenberg, really knew her as his grandmother. He didn't even know a lot of the things that he's going to read about in the book in terms of her remarkable career. But one thing he said that really struck me was she had the ability to get into these rooms of power, whether it was business leaders, whether it was military leaders, whether it was presidents of the United States. And remarkably, she had the social graces to stay there. We in history, we see characters that might be a confidant or an advisor to one president, but never 3 or 4 or 5. And Anna Rosenberg had this remarkable ability to listen, to be an engaging speaker, to be entertaining to the president, but also to get all those jobs done and done well. And on top of that, she could keep secrets. She was the confidant. And when, what was said in the Oval Office, Anna Rosenberg thought that shouldn't leave the Oval Office, So she wasn't interested in writing memoirs. She wasn't interested in kiss and tells. And these presidents and leaders really appreciated that for decades. Your question has been asked by all the folks that have read the advanced copy and have, that's just a question that everyone who reads this book is going to want to know the answer to. And part of it is her desire to keep those important discussions that she had with important people secret. That's a big part of it. But there are other reasons. One is Anna Rosenberg did not have a college education, if you can believe it. She did all these amazing things with just having gone to high school. And if we look at people like Frances Perkins or other women leaders, in politics and in business, they've gone to, in many cases, elite institutions. And those places like Penn or Columbia have kept their flame alive and have, been a champion of these women. Anna Rosenberg did not have those institutions. Another reason would be when she was sort of famous in the 40s and 50s, she'd be approached by magazines and newspapers. She wanted to deflect the attention away from her and towards the people that she thought deserved the accolades or the event that was happening. So it was always never about her. It was always about, here's the war workers that are winning the war. Here's the congressmen that are making the laws that are helping the United States expand democracy and so forth. So she really had this wonderful way of, she probably appreciated or did appreciate that she was moving things behind the scenes, but she was content to remain behind the scenes and be the power behind the throne.
Why do you think her story is so important to tell today?
I love answering this question, and her story is inspiring. And it's not just inspiring to women, and it would not be just inspiring to people that want to move the needle in politics. It's the story of what an engaged citizen can do. Whether that's housing equity, whether that's climate justice. You don't have to go out and seek fame to do this. You can do it behind the scenes. You can do it quietly. You can do it anonymously. But if you're an engaged citizen at the level of Anna Rosenberg or inspired by Anna Rosenberg, we can make change in this country, and we can make this country a greater country. And she was very, very patriotic. And she was an immigrant as a girl, and she loved the United States, and she wanted nothing more than the United States to become the greatest nation it could. And you and I and individuals around the country all have that ability, so long as we're engaged citizens and we're willing to work at it.
Now, I heard that you didn't do and sort through all those piles of research on your own. I heard you got a bit of help from Westford Academy capstone students. Would you mind telling us a bit about them?
Not only were my history students there at the very, very first day we saw Anna Rosenberg's papers at Harvard in April of 2019, but they heard the stories as I was writing the book in different class lessons where some of her stories would be applicable. And then as the book was being finished, a couple of capstone students, seniors, helped put together a selected bibliography. And this was great because we wanted to make sure the book wasn't too long and the bibliography didn't go on for 50 or 60 pages. So the publisher said, can you get a selected bibliography? And we need it yesterday. So I had to go back and sort of scramble, how are we going to do this? Well, Sophie Sloan and Alexander Ryan, were willing to help me during their capstone program of their senior year to put together a selected bibliography of really the key books, newspaper articles, magazine articles, and other pieces of research. And they just did an amazing job. And their work appears at the back of the CONFIDANTE as the selected bibliography. 17-year-old kids, 17-year-old youngsters, and to have that work in a published book that hopefully will reach a lot of readers is just very gratifying to me, and I'm sure it'll be something they can be very proud of.
Recently, Westford Museum Director Linda Green had an opportunity to speak with Sophie Sloan, Mr. Gorham's capstone intern that he just discussed. Let's listen to that interview now.
Sophie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a lover of all things history and English. I have been since I can remember, if I'm being honest. And that's actually what I'm doing in college right now. I'm an English major and I'm hoping to pick up a history minor. Not sure really where I want to go with it other than potentially being an author or a teacher, but I'm working towards it and I'm going to figure it out on the way.
So tell us when you graduated from Westford Academy and when you were working on this project.
I graduated with the class of 2022, and that tail end of my senior year was just 100% focused on the CONFIDANTE.
That's great. Can you tell us a little bit about the project and working with Mr. Gorham?
Of course, it was so much fun. I don't think anyone else had as much fun on their capstone project, to be honest. It was mostly work in the library, which I can't complain. I love sitting in the library. And Alex and I, my partner, we worked on the bibliography and the annotated bibliography, which involved going through either lists of sources that Mr. Gorham gave us, physical books. There were about, I'd say, 5 bags of books, all about this thick, hardcover copies. We had to carry those from his car all the way up to the library. It was a great arm workout. And go through and individually add each of those books, check them off, find a system to make sure we didn't do one book twice. And the tricky part, though, was the small footnotes in the manuscript of his book, because those tended to have far less detailed information. So we had to go digging through some archives online to certainly find like exactly what we needed to make an official like mark of it in the bibliography.
Oh, interesting. Why did you choose the project for your capstone internship?
Well, I had been thinking about capstone since I was a freshman. I was so excited. And then it came time to start thinking about it for real, and I panicked. I couldn't think of one thing that encapsulated all my interests. I was thinking I could write a research paper about the history of Westford. I could intern at the library. I could be like a classroom assistant for an old teacher of mine. But nothing quite fit everything I was interested in until a friend of mine actually brought my attention to Mr. Gorham's capstone project he was offering. And it fit history, it fit English. It was working with one of my favorite teachers. And I immediately knew, this is it. I have to do this. It's perfect.
Sounds like a great fit. Was there a teacher or a class or an experience at Westford Academy that inspired you to apply for this project?
There were 2 teachers in predictably, Mr. Gorham, of course. He was one teacher I had twice, and in my sophomore year, when I was a super anxious kid, never talked to the teachers, always like I only raised my hand if I knew the answer, dreaded getting called on if I didn't, all of that. He immediately made his classroom feel welcome. He, from day one, showed his passion for the subject, and not only his passion for the subject, but his passion for us learning about it and having a passion of our own. And I remember, gathering up all my confidence, staying after class one day and asking, do you have any books about this subject that you went over? Because I'm super interested. And immediately smiling right away, went to his bookshelf, found the perfect book for it, loaned it to me, and even shared a story about the subject the next day in class. And it just immediately made me feel a lot more comfortable, not only approaching him as a teacher, but teachers in general, which was a super helpful, inspiring experience. And then the other is Mrs. McCarthy, my sophomore year English teacher, she immediately helped me feel comfortable in the classroom. I already loved English, but she made it 10 times better. She even got the most disinterested kids who didn't want to do the reading interested in Shakespeare. Super passionate, and she's part of the reason that I wanted to go down the path of being an English teacher and why I wanted to get involved in a project relating to English and books and literature and their importance.
They both sound like very influential and outstanding teachers. What were some of the obstacles or challenges that you discovered when researching Anne and Rosenberg for this project?
Well, one of the challenges that wasn't directly related to the capstone project was the fact that there is just no information out there about her. I was amazed with how much information Mr. Gorham was able to get for this book and how much work he put in for it. Because even if you do deep dives, you dig into it, you are just spend a whole day in Googling, researching, grabbing books, you aren't going to easily find a ton of information, which is sad because it's such an inspiring story. And then a challenge that was more directly related to the project itself was the footnotes in the manuscript that were simply like the name of a magazine and a date, or an author's name and the name of a magazine, because Alex and I would have to go through old archives online, sometimes try and get past, find ways to do it where we didn't have to subscribe to Vogue magazine, and go through and find specific articles from 1943 or 1950, which was difficult at first, but we got accustomed to it.
That's great. Were there some surprising aspect of Anna Rosenberg's life that you discovered while working on this project?
There's one that I discovered really early that may not seem like a big surprise or something super important, but to me it is, and I think it is in general, is that Anna Rosenberg was a Jewish woman, and she was not only up against the challenges of misogyny, but of anti-Semitism. And as a Jewish woman myself, it was awe-inspiring how she not only managed to do a lot of great work in her early career, she continued to do it. She continued to push forward. And no matter the challenges she faced, she kept pushing and she kept working.
Yeah.
And it inspired me beyond belief. Like, she's still one of my personal heroes.
Yeah. Thank you. Why do you think her story is still important today?
Well, today in the world, we see that misogyny and anti-Semitism are not only still prevalent, but oftentimes are on the rise, and it can be terrifying. It can feel like there's just no hope, things are going to keep getting worse and worse and worse, and we're moving back in time. But even back then, there are stories like Anna Rosenberg, who was able to conquer both, and not only was she able to live a successful life, she was able to live a successful life that impacted the lives of others. She was able not only to make her own life better, but in doing so, improve the lives of almost everyone in America. And it wasn't just that she focused on improving the lives of those who were like her. She worked on improving the lives of soldiers, the lower working class, anyone and everyone who could have been considered an underdog in history. Anna Rosenberg had their back. And that is something that I think is still such an important mindset to have today, that everyone needs to band together if we want to overcome any of the rising challenges that we face today.
Thank you, Sophie. The book, The Confidant, by Westford Academy author Chris Gorham, has been meticulously researched with the assistance by Westford Academy graduate Sophia Sloan. It is a book about Anna Rosenberg and how she deserved to take her rightful place in history books as one of America's most important and influential women. And I hope you will join us on Sunday, March 12th, here at the Westford Museum at 1 p.m. For Chris Gorham's Westford book launch, his book release, the discussion, and book signing. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.